Chapter 1. Trash Talk in the Heart of New York, a city that never slept, not even for a second. The streets were always alive with activity. The towering skyscrapers of gleaming metals and crystal-clear glass seemed to touch the sky, their peaks hidden in the clouds. This was the hub of commerce and innovation on the planet Zorbia 6, where the air was thick with the hum of holographic advertisements and the chatter of pedestrians. In this bustling metropolis, there existed a world within a world, the one inhabited by the humble garbage collectors of ZODS, Zorbian Government's Department of Sanitation. Among them was Zax Blackwood, a lovable but slightly delinquent young man with a heart of gold and a mind full of mischief. His daily routine began before the sun had even considered rising over the horizon. As he ambled out of his small apartment in one of the countless residential towers that lined the streets of NNY, Zax stretched his lean frame, arching his back and extending his arms above his head. He yawned loudly, revealing a set of crooked teeth that made him look like a perpetually grinning fool. His eyes, a bright and mischievous brown, sparkled with anticipation as he headed towards the garage where his trusty trash truck awaited. "Hey, Buzz, rise and shine," Zax called out to his wisecracking sidekick, who was already perched on the driver's seat of their vehicle. The bright green truck, emblazoned with the proud logo of ZODS, looked like it had been through a war and come out on top. Buzz, a scrappy little man with a mop of unruly red hair and a grin that could charm the stars from the sky, turned around with a yawn. "What's the haps, Zax? You know we gotta be on time for Mrs. Gloom's daily ranting session." Zax chuckled as he climbed into the passenger seat beside his friend. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. She's always got some new way to make our lives more miserable, but it's always entertaining in a train wreck kind of way." As they set off towards their first collection point, Zax took the time to check his personal comms device for any messages from his boss, Mrs. Gloom. It was a ritual he performed every morning without fail. Great," he muttered to himself as he scrolled through the feed. "She's already got us scheduled for an extra collection in Sector 4B today." "That's right," Buzz chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because nothing says fun like collecting trash from the most obnoxious and entitled sector in NNY. Zax grinned as he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, at least we get to see some of our favorite grumpy faces today. It's not all bad." As they made their way through the streets, weaving past pedestrians and hovercars, Zax and Buzz were a familiar sight in the bustling metropolis. They knew every alleyway, every shortcut, and every trash can by heart. Their banter and good-natured teasing became a staple of the daily routine for those who lived and worked in NNY. Mrs. Gloom, their exasperated boss, might not have appreciated their antics as much as they did, but deep down, even she couldn't deny the importance of Zax and Buzz's work. Without them, the city would be a stinking mess, and no one wanted that on their conscience. As they began their rounds, the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its golden rays over the concrete jungle. It was another day in the life of Zax Blackwood and his trusty sidekick Buzz. A day filled with trash talk, wisecracks, and the never-ending quest to keep New York spick and span. Chapter 1. The Heist, Zax groaned as he trudged along behind Buzz, his trash-collecting partner for what felt like an eternity. They were stuck on this menial task, cruising through the high-end space mall in their rickety, garbage-covered cart, trying to avoid eye contact with the snooty shoppers. "Come on, Zax, keep up," Buzz called out, his voice carrying across the mall's gleaming marble floor. Zax muttered under his breath as he hastened to catch up. He hated this job. Hated it with a passion that rivaled his love for bad jokes and mediocre space grub. As they turned a corner, Zax spotted something glinting in the dim light of an alleyway between two upscale boutiques. His curiosity got the better of him, and he veered off course to investigate. "Hey, Buzz, wait up," Zax called out as he slipped into the narrow alleyway. Buzz followed close behind, his eyes fixed on Zax with a mix of annoyance and concern. "What's going on, Zax? We've got a job to do." Zax ducked between two large trash containers, and Buzz followed him in. The air was thick with the stench of rotting food and stale air. As they pushed aside a tarpaulin, they stumbled upon an unexpected sight. A small, intricately carved box made of a glittering metallic material. The box itself seemed to be pulsating with a soft blue light, and Zax's eyes widened as he reached out to touch it. Buzz grabbed his arm, cautioning him not to disturb whatever was inside. "What is this thing?" Zax breathed, his mind racing with possibilities. Buzz shook his head, equally perplexed. "I don't know, but I think we should leave it alone." Zax hesitated for a moment before carefully lifting the lid of the box. Inside, they found an artifact unlike anything they had ever seen before. A delicate crystal sphere surrounded by a latticework of glowing silver filaments. As soon as Zax touched the sphere with his fingers, the box emitted a loud hum and the blue light intensified. Buzz stumbled backward, eyes wide with alarm. "What did you do?" he exclaimed. Zax stared at the artifact in wonder, transfixed by its shimmering beauty. "I think we might have just found something incredible," he whispered, hardly daring to believe it himself. Little did they know that this discovery would set off a chain reaction of events that would shake the entire galaxy and put them right in the crosshairs of every shady character from across the cosmos. As they stood there, mesmerized by the artifact's ethereal glow, a sly voice echoed through the alleyway. "Well, well, well. Looks like we've got ourselves some very lucky trash collectors." A burly, rough-looking alien emerged from the shadows, his eyes locked on the crystal sphere. Zax and Buzz exchanged uneasy glances as they realized their mistake. "Oh," Zax whispered to Buzz. "I think we just found ourselves in a bit of trouble." The chase begins. Zax and Buzz were running for their lives. Well, not literally running. They were more like frantically sprinting across the open plains of the space station's outer rim. Behind them, a group of goons from the infamous space mafia of Zorvath were hot on their heels. The two friends had stumbled into a bit of trouble earlier that day while trying to procure some much-needed spare parts for their trusty spaceship, the merry-go-round. Who knew that those particular parts would be so coveted by the space mafia? As they ran, Zax and Buzz could hear the goons closing in. Their leader, a burly alien with a scar above his left eyebrow, was shouting orders at his minions. "Take 'em alive. We need to get some intel out of these two." Zax and Buzz exchanged a panicked glance. They knew they couldn't outrun the mafia forever. But for now, it was either run or risk getting caught and possibly turned into space spies themselves. Just as they thought things couldn't get any worse, a goofy-looking alien from planet Goof suddenly appeared out of nowhere. "Hey, friends, need some help? I'm Zinc. I can totally assist you with your, speedy situation." Zax and Buzz didn't have time to ask what kind of assistance Zinc had in mind. In his enthusiasm to help, the well-meaning but hapless alien tripped over his own feet and face-planted into a nearby trash compactor. The resulting explosion sent garbage flying everywhere, including all over the goons' sleek black hoverbikes. The space mafia was momentarily stunned. Zax and Buzz took advantage of the distraction to make a break for their ship, which was parked just a short distance away. But as they ran, Zinc suddenly popped out from behind a nearby dumpster, grinning like an idiot. "Ta-da, mission accomplished, guys. See how I helped?" Zax and Buzz exchanged a skeptical look. Thanks, Zinc," Zax said dryly. "We really appreciate it." But before they could make their escape, the goons, now recovered from their trash compactor-induced shock, closed in once more. "Take him down," their leader bellowed. Zax and Buzz were caught between a rock and a hard place, or rather, a group of ruthless space mafia thugs. Zinc, still trying to be helpful, stumbled into the fray, causing even more chaos. The chase was on. The two friends zigzagged across the space station's corridors, dodging goons left and right. But with Zinc's antics adding to the mayhem, it seemed like an impossible task to evade capture. Just when all hope seemed lost, they stumbled upon a narrow ventilation shaft. With no time to think, they squeezed inside just as the mafia was closing in. As the dust settled outside, Zax and Buzz lay panting in the dimly lit ductwork. They exchanged a relieved glance. They'd managed to evade capture. For now. But just as they thought it was safe to breathe a sigh of relief, they heard footsteps echoing through the shaft. "Hey, guys, I think I might have caused some more problems." Zink's muffled voice drifted from above them. Zax and Buzz exchanged a groan. It seemed their misadventure with Planet Goof's hapless hero was far from over. Chapter 1. Bureaucratic red tape Zax and his trusty sidekick, Buzz, walked into the high-rise building that housed the headquarters of ZODS, Zones of Defense Services. The sleek, silver doors slid open with a soft hiss as they approached, and a robotic voice greeted them. "Welcome to ZODS HQ. Please state your business." Zax, who had been expecting this, proudly held up the strange artifact they had retrieved from the mystical realm. "We've got an artifact to turn in." The robot's expression didn't change, but its tone took on a slightly more interested inflection. "Ah, yes, artifact turn-in protocol. Please proceed to the designated reception area." As they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors, Zax couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. After all, they were finally getting some recognition for their bravery and quick thinking in retrieving this mysterious object. Upon arriving at the reception desk, Zax was greeted by Mrs. Gloom, a middle-aged woman with a permanent scowl etched on her face. Her name tag read, receptionist and compliance officer. No wonder she looked so glum all the time. "What can I do for you?" she asked in a tone that made Zax's skin crawl. "We've got an artifact to turn in," Buzz chimed in, trying to be helpful. Mrs. Gloom raised an eyebrow and peered at the artifact through a pair of thick, black-rimmed glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Is this thing properly documented?" Zax hesitated for a moment before responding. I think so. We found it in the mystical realm, and we filled out all the necessary forms." Mrs. Gloom cut him off with a stern look. "Not just any form will do. You'll need to fill out Form Z12BC, which specifically covers artifacts retrieved from non-earthly realms." Zax's eyes widened in frustration as he pulled out his comms device and scrolled through the form's database. Isn't there a shortcut for this? We're kind of in a hurry." Mrs. Gloom shook her head, her expression unyielding. "Protocol dictates that all necessary forms be completed in their entirety before proceeding." The rest of the day was spent filling out forms and waiting in line after line of bureaucratic red tape. Zax's patience wore thin as they encountered more and more hurdles, each one seemingly designed to drive them further and further away from their goal. As the sun began to set outside, casting a warm orange glow over the high-rise building, Zax was at his wit's end. "That's it, I've had enough. We're going to talk to someone higher up." Buzz nodded in agreement as they made their way to the nearest elevator bank. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and they stepped inside just as Mrs. Gloom appeared behind them. "Where do you think you're going? You still haven't filled out Form Z12BC. Zax's eyes rolled heavenward in exasperation. "Not now, Mrs. Gloom. We'll get to it later." The elevator doors closed with a soft click, and the two friends stood there for a moment, letting out simultaneous sighs of relief. "Well, that was fun," Buzz said dryly. Zax shot him a wry grin. "Tell me about it. Let's just hope we can make it through this place without losing our minds." The elevator doors slid open on the next floor, and they stepped out into the crowded hallway. As they made their way deeper into the building, Zax couldn't help but wonder what other bureaucratic obstacles lay in store for them. Their quest to turn in the artifact was far from over, and it looked like it would only get more complicated from here. Chapter 1. The well-meaning menace Zax was having a bad day. He had just finished a long project at work and was looking forward to a relaxing evening at home. But as he walked out of the office building, he was greeted by two familiar faces: Buzz, his best friend, and a bumbling alien from Planet Goof. The alien, whose name was Zink, was known for causing more chaos than good wherever he went. He meant well, but his well-meaning attempts to help often ended in disaster. "Hey, guys," Zink exclaimed, bounding towards them with a huge smile on his face. I've come up with the perfect plan to help you out." Zax and Buzz exchanged a skeptical look. This was not the first time Zinc had tried to help them out, and it usually ended in some kind of catastrophe. "What is it this time?" Zax asked warily. "I've been studying the art of, extreme yard work," Zinc announced proudly. "I can teach you both how to make your yards the most fantastic on the block." Buzz raised an eyebrow. "Extreme yard work?" Zinc nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, I'll show you how to plant the most vibrant flowers and mow the lawn in a way that will make it look like a, lawn sculpture," Zax sighed. He had been looking forward to a peaceful evening at home, but now it seemed that he was about to get roped into one of Zinc's harebrained schemes. "Okay, fine," Zax said resignedly. "Let's go see what kind of chaos you have planned this time." As they walked towards Zinc's spaceship, which was parked on the side of the road, Zax couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. He had been through this before: the excitement, the anticipation, and finally, the crushing disappointment when Zinc's plans fell apart. But Zinc was undeterred. "This is going to be the best day ever," he exclaimed, bouncing up and down like a rubber ball. "I can feel it." As they reached the spaceship, Buzz spoke up. "You know, I'm starting to think that maybe we should just let you do your own thing for once." Zax raised an eyebrow. Was this some kind of joke? But then he looked at Zinc and saw the genuine excitement in his eyes. "Wait a minute," Zax said slowly. "Maybe, just maybe, your harebrained scheme won't completely destroy our lives." Buzz chuckled. "Yeah, that's probably the most optimistic outlook I've ever heard." Zinc beamed with pride. "I knew you guys would see it my way. Now let's get started on this extreme yard work thing." And so, despite their reservations, Zax and Buzz found themselves being dragged into one of Zinc's wild adventures. Little did they know that this time around, things were going to be more chaotic than ever. Chapter 1. The Space Mafia Strikes Back. The sun was setting over the bustling spaceport, casting a golden glow over the crowded docking bays and cramped corridors of the galactic terminal. Amidst the chaos of takeoffs and landings, Zax and Buzz had managed to slip in unnoticed, their eyes scanning the area for any sign of trouble. It had been weeks since they'd foiled the Space Mafia's initial attempt to acquire the legendary artifact, a priceless relic rumored to grant its owner unimaginable power. The gang leader, a ruthless mercenary known only as Vexar, had been furious at the setback, vowing to personally oversee the next attempt. And now, it seemed, he was back, with an even more menacing entourage in tow. Zax's instincts were on high alert as he tugged on Buzz's arm, whispering urgently, "Dude, we need to get out of here. Now." Buzz followed his gaze, and their eyes met over the rim of Zax's glasses. "What is it?" Vexar stood at the edge of the crowd, a towering figure in a black duster coat, his cold gaze scanning the area like a predator on the hunt. "That guy," Zax whispered, pointing discreetly. "He's Vexar, the Space Mafia leader." Buzz's eyes widened as he took in the scene. "And look at all those goons with him. We're not taking on that many again, are we?" Zax shook his head firmly. "We can't let them get their hands on the artifact. We have to stop them, but..." Quietly, the unlikely duo had managed to evade the Space Mafia once before, and they were determined to do it again. They melted into the crowd, trying to blend in with the throngs of travelers as Vexar's goons began to spread out, searching for their prey. "Where are we headed?" Buzz asked, his voice barely audible over the din of the spaceport. Zax consulted a hastily printed map on his comms device. "We've got a contact who can help us get off planet. She's supposed to meet us at the Blue Moon Cantina." Their footsteps carried them swiftly through the crowded corridors as they made their way towards the exit, always keeping Vexar and his goons in sight. As they emerged into the cool night air, Zax glanced back over his shoulder, spotting a figure in the shadows. It was one of Vexar's henchmen, eyeing them with an unnerving intensity. "We've got company," Zax whispered, already moving at a swift pace towards their contact point. The Blue Moon Cantina beckoned like a beacon, its neon sign casting a gaudy glow over the darkened streets. Zax and Buzz pushed through the doors, slamming themselves into the crowded bar area as they sought refuge from the goons hot on their heels. Their eyes scanned the chaotic scene, searching for their contact. She was supposed to be wearing a pair of oversized sunglasses and a ridiculous hat, a look that stood out in this otherwise ordinary cantina. As they squeezed through the crowd, Zax spotted her sitting at a booth near the back, nursing a drink with an air of quiet confidence. "That's her," he whispered to Buzz, nudging him forward. Their contact, a no-nonsense woman named Nova, raised an eyebrow as they slid into the booth opposite her. Well, if it isn't the Space Mafia's most wanted duo." Zax flashed his best smile while Buzz looked sheepish. "Hey, we're just trying to lay low for a bit. You know how it is." Nova chuckled, sipping her drink. "I do indeed, and I'm happy to help you both out, for a price." The negotiations began in earnest as Nova laid out the terms of their deal, one that would require Zax and Buzz to put aside their differences and work together with her for the safety of all involved. But little did they know, Vexar's goons were closing in on their position even now. Chapter 7. Mrs. Gloom's soft spot. Mrs. Gloom stormed into the dimly lit conference room, her presence as intimidating as ever. Her stern expression and sharp jawline made her look like a walking thundercloud, ready to unleash a torrent of doom on anyone who dared to cross her. Zax and his coworkers exchanged nervous glances, wondering what fresh hell misses Gloom had brought upon them this time. They had grown accustomed to her harsh demeanor, but still couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear whenever she entered the room. However, as she approached their table, something unexpected caught Zax's attention. A faint smile played on the corners of Mrs. Gloom's lips, and for an instant, her tough exterior seemed to crack just enough to reveal a glimmer of softness. "Ah, team," she said, her voice still gruff but with a hint of warmth. "I see you're all huddled around the table, trying to figure out how to get Zax here out of the mess he's gotten himself into." Zax's eyes widened as Mrs. Gloom took a seat beside him, her long coat folding itself neatly behind her. He felt a strange sense of comfort under her arm, which only added to his confusion. Now, team," she continued. "Don't look at me like I've lost my mind. Yes, Zax here has gotten himself into quite the pickle with that Space Mafia bunch, but I think we can persuade them to let him off the hook." Zax's coworkers exchanged skeptical glances, but Mrs. Gloom's expression remained resolute. "I may not be the most approachable person in the galaxy," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of self-deprecation, "but I do have my ways. Trust me on this one." Without warning, Mrs. Gloom pulled out a small device from her coat pocket and began tapping away at it with a speed that would put the fastest keyboard wizard to shame. "What are you doing?" Zax asked, his curiosity piqued. "Sending a discreet message to certain parties," she replied, her eyes fixed intently on the device. "We'll get Zax here off the hook in no time." As Mrs. Gloom continued to tap away at the device, her fingers moved with a precision that belied her tough exterior. She was like a conductor leading an orchestra of code and data, orchestrating a symphony of digital communication that would surely bring about their desired outcome. Zax watched in awe as Mrs. Gloom worked her magic, her expression transformed from one of gruffness to a soft spot for him and his coworkers. It was almost touching. "You know," she said, finally putting the device away, "I think I might have gotten a bit too comfortable with you lot." Zax's eyes widened in surprise as Mrs. Gloom leaned over and gave each of them a brief but firm pat on the back. "Don't get any ideas, though," she warned, her expression stern once again. "This is just professional courtesy. Don't think for a moment that I've gone soft." As Mrs. Gloom stood up to leave, Zax couldn't help but wonder if he had finally seen beyond the tough exterior of Mrs. Gloom and caught a glimpse of the person beneath. It was a thought both thrilling and terrifying. "You lot take care now," she said, her voice once again gruff but with a hint of warmth. "And don't get into any more trouble." As Mrs. Gloom stormed out of the conference room, Zax's coworkers exchanged glances, each one wondering if they had just witnessed something extraordinary or just another day in the life of Mrs. Gloom. Chapter 7. The final confrontation, the air was thick with tension, as Zax and Buzz stood face to face with the notorious space mafia gang leader, Vortex. His goons, a motley crew of scowling thugs from various planets, formed a semicircle around them, their eyes gleaming with malice. "So, you think you can take me down?" Vortex sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're just two insignificant little beings from the backwater planet Zinc." Zax and Buzz exchanged a confident glance before responding in unison. "Bring it on." Vortex snarled, baring his teeth. His goons began to close in, but Zax raised a hand, signaling them to hold back. "Not yet," he said, eyes locked on Vortex. "We need to settle this between us." Buzz nodded in agreement. "Besides, we don't want any collateral damage." Vortex snorted, clearly unimpressed by their bravado. He took a step closer, his massive frame looming over the two Zinkians. "You think you can take me down?" he repeated, his voice rising to a crescendo. "I've crushed entire galaxies with my bare hands." Zax and Buzz stood firm, undaunted by Vortex's boasts. In fact, they were starting to get a bit bored. "Oh, please," Zax said, rolling his eyes. "You're just a big talker. Where's your famous Vortex punch?" Buzz chuckled. "Yeah, we've heard it was more like a sad little tap with your thumb." The goons around them started to snicker and whisper among themselves. Vortex's face turned beet red with rage. "You think you're funny?" he spat. "You'll be the ones who are laughing, all the way back to Zinc, in a box." Just then, a loud, high-pitched voice echoed through the Space Mafia hideout. "Hey, hey, don't fight, I've got an idea." It was Ziggy, the well-meaning but hapless alien from Planet Goof. He burst into the room, his long ears flapping wildly as he dodged the goons' outstretched arms. Zax and Buzz exchanged a resigned look. They knew that whatever Ziggy came up with, it would be bound to backfire in spectacular fashion. "What's your idea this time?" Zax asked wearily. Ziggy beamed with excitement. "I've got it, we'll just distract Vortex with my planet's famous goof gas." Buzz raised an eyebrow. "The goof gas?" Ziggy nodded vigorously. Yes, it's a unique energy field that will make him forget all about you two and go running for the hills." Zax sighed. He knew what would happen next. "Don't do it, Ziggy," he said firmly. "Trust me on this one." But Ziggy was undeterred. He fumbled in his pocket and produced a small canister filled with a bright green gas. "Here we go," he shouted, releasing the contents into the air. The Space Mafia hideout erupted into chaos as the goof gas took effect. Vortex's eyes began to water uncontrollably, and he stumbled around, completely disoriented. His goons were equally affected, stumbling about and bumping into each other in a hilarious display of confusion. Zax and Buzz looked at each other, shook their heads, and chuckled. "Well," Zax said, grinning, "I guess that's one way to take down the Space Mafia leader." But just as they thought they'd won, Vortex suddenly stopped stumbling and fixed his gaze on them with a fierce determination. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice dripping with malice. "Just wait until I remember what's going on." And with that, the battle between Zax, Buzz, and Vortex continued, with Ziggy's goof gas lingering in the background like a bad smell. The fate of the galaxy was still very much up in the air, but one thing was certain: it would be an eventful ride. Chapter 1. The aftermath. Zax trudged through the front door, dropping his backpack onto the floor with a thud. His friends, Jax and Vinny, followed closely behind, their faces equally as exhausted as his own. Their mom, Mrs. Thompson, looked up from her spot on the couch, where she'd been enjoying a well-deserved nap. Well. Looks like you three had quite the adventure," she said, eyeing the trio's disheveled appearance. Zax just shook his head, flopping down into the nearest chair. "You have no idea, Mom." Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow but didn't press the issue. She knew that whatever had happened, it couldn't be good. Zax and his friends were always getting into some kind of trouble, and Mrs. Thompson had grown accustomed to fielding worried phone calls from the school. Over the next hour, Zax's friends and he filled her in on their escapades. There was the time they accidentally set off the fire alarm during a prank gone wrong, or the occasion when they were caught sneaking into the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Mrs. Thompson listened attentively, trying not to laugh at the boys' antics. However, this latest incident was different. This time, things had gotten serious. It turned out that Zax's harebrained scheme to reorganize the school's prized possession, a priceless, ancient statue, had actually worked. The statue was now safely ensconced in the principal's office, and everyone in town was celebrating its return. The only problem was, the statue belonged to a rival school, and they were not pleased about its acquisition. Zax's friends had managed to fence it to a local collector, but now that person had been caught and implicated several of Zax's classmates. As Mrs. Thompson listened to this tale, her expression grew more serious by the minute. She'd always warned Zax and his friends about taking responsibility for their actions, and now she was faced with the consequences of those words going unheeded. "You three are in a bit of trouble, aren't you?" Mrs. Thompson asked, trying to keep her tone light despite the gravity of the situation. Zax shifted uncomfortably in his seat, knowing that he'd gotten them all into this mess. "I guess so." Mrs. Thompson sighed, shaking her head. "Well, let's just say I'm glad it wasn't a school year ago when you kids were still figuring things out. You're going to have to face the music for this one, boys." As she spoke, Zax felt a weight settle upon him. He realized that his actions had consequences, and now he'd have to live with them. "Mom's right," Jax chimed in, breaking the silence that followed Mrs. Thompson's statement. "You gotta take responsibility for what you do, Zax." Vinny nodded vigorously, adding, "Yeah, we all knew it was a bad idea, but you convinced us to go along with it." Zax looked down at his feet, knowing they were right. He'd let his friends down by not considering the potential consequences of their actions. Over the next few days, Zax and his friends faced the music for their actions. They apologized to their classmates and helped pay back some of the damage they'd caused. As they worked to repair the harm done, Zax began to learn a valuable lesson about responsibility and growing up. It wasn't easy, but with every passing day, he came to realize that his actions had real-world effects on those around him. And as he learned this hard-won wisdom, Zax felt himself growing up, becoming more aware of the world and its complexities. For a boy who'd always been driven by excitement and impulsivity, it was a difficult but necessary step forward into adulthood. Chapter 1. New beginnings. As I stepped out of the spaceship's cargo bay, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia wash over me. The garbage-covered streets of planet ZZ9 looked different now, almost familiar. It was hard to believe it had been 3 months since my friends and I had arrived on this peculiar world, intent on making a name for ourselves as the galaxy's most skilled garbage collectors. My partner, Vex, gave me a nod as we began our daily routine, scanning the streets for any signs of waste or debris. We'd learned so much about the planet and its eccentric inhabitants since our arrival. The G-Nightshades, with their fondness for fermented space slugs, the Zealorgs, who seemed to think littering was a form of art, and the enigmatic Mayor Quimby, always scheming to get his hands on our spaceship. As we navigated through the crowded streets, I couldn't help but reflect on our experiences. We'd had our fair share of close calls, from narrowly avoiding a group of angry Zealorgs to outsmarting the G-Nightshade's notorious garbage-sniffing hounds. It was a wonder we'd made it this long without getting ourselves killed. But with each passing day, I realized that being on ZZ9 had taught me more than just how to navigate through a sea of trash. We'd learned about perseverance, teamwork, and the importance of never giving up, no matter how hopeless things seemed. And of course, there was the added bonus of making some truly unforgettable friends. As we made our way back to the spaceship, I spotted something peculiar on the side of the road. A small, makeshift sign that read, "Zax's Garage," in crooked letters. It was then that I realized just how much this experience had changed me. No longer content with simply collecting garbage, I'd begun to see the potential for growth and entrepreneurship. Vex raised an eyebrow as he took in the sight of the sign. "You planning on turning our garbage-collecting gig into a full-fledged business?" he asked, amusement dancing in his voice. I grinned, feeling a sense of excitement wash over me. Why not? We've got the skills, we've got the knowledge, and who knows, maybe we'll even attract some alien investors. The two of us exchanged a look, both of us knowing that this was just the beginning of our next great adventure. We'd faced down trash-filled alleys, outsmarted vicious creatures, and even managed to stay one step ahead of Mayor Quimby's henchmen. Now, it was time for something new, something bigger, bolder, and more daring than anything we'd ever attempted before. "All right, Vex," I said, a mischievous glint in my eye. "Let's get to work on making Zax's garage the go-to destination for all your intergalactic waste management needs." Vex chuckled, clapping me on the back. "You know what? I think this just might be our best idea yet." Together, we began brainstorming, tossing around ideas and making plans for our new venture. As we talked, the streets of ZZ9 seemed to fade into the background, replaced by visions of a bright, shining future, one filled with endless possibilities and boundless potential. It was time for us to take the next step on this wild, unpredictable journey through the galaxy, and I couldn't wait to see what other adventures lay ahead.